I love disc golf. And I love in the bags. I especially love amateur in the bags. So here's my amateur in the bag. I'll start with my putting putter. And I've got 3 of them. These are the Dynamic Disc Deputy. Deputy is an awesome disc, especially for the way I putt. I'm mostly a push putter, trying to add some spin. You know, I can kind of say that I'm a little bit of a spush putter, but mostly a push putter. It comes out a lot on hyzer. I kind of have trouble getting it flatter. I'm working on just hitting chains. And the Deputy is wonderful because it's very understable, but at slow speeds, when you're in the circle or even in circle 2, it's very straight. And I can basically, within about 20-25 feet, just aim for the exact length of the chain that I want to hit, and it'll hit that chain. And then when it gets a little bit farther, 35, 40, I just aim a little bit up, a little bit right as a right-handed player, and it'll just hit the spot. So, and farther and farther away, I'll just aim maybe top of the band, right side of the basket at like 50, 60 feet, and just do my normal putt right at that spot. And these are incredible. The Deputy, not very many people use them that I've seen out there on the course. The Judge is a lot more popular, but the Judge is beaded. This is not beaded. It's pretty shallow. Maybe one of the shallowest putting putters that I've seen, and I love that. I love shallow discs. They feel good. Also, the no bead, it doesn't catch on my finger, and overall, just great. This blue one is pretty beat in, which I love. The more beat in, the better, especially for those circle 2 putts. It just ends up staying straight, it feels like, in a lot of situations. I got a couple newer ones. This white one's actually a little newer, and it's a little less flippy, so it's kind of fun to throw as well in different situations. And I have 3 generally so that I can do some putting practice before rounds, or especially before tournaments. Then next one is a throwing putter that I love. It's the Trash Panda Inner Core, and it is in, they call it, I think, 95A plastic, which is kind of their star-like plastic. It's premium, but it's not super rigid or anything like that. This is a great disc. It's very straight as far as for putting. When I putt, I like to kind of use a grip, or when I should say my grip actually. I'll say my grip for putting is something like that. It's a fan grip mostly. This index finger helps with just getting a little bit of spin and snap on it, but it's about like that. Pretty similar when I'm throwing within about, throwing a putter about 200 feet. I like to have a lot of touch with that, and it's almost the same grip, very close. I think these fingers are maybe a little bit tighter here towards the rim, but I'm just putting pressure with my thumb, and actually my middle finger, like my thumb and that spot, are the spot that has the friction when I let it go. So anyway, this inner core at 200, 225, 230, 240-ish, it's very straight. It'll fly dead straight 200 footers, which are very fun to have. Those are the best ace runs throws. So then I've got a Berg. This is a K3 line, and it's kind of gummy. A funny little story on this is I like throwing the Berg, but then I was on a short course a while back, and a friend of mine had one that looked just like this one, black, same exact run. And I saw it, and I kind of felt it, and you can see here, it's got some gumminess, which is not really something K3 line always has with the Berg. And so I ordered a Berg. It turned out it was the same K3 line, but it wasn't as gummy. It was pretty rigid. So I used it for like a year, and I was like, I don't know why his was so gummy. Well, I saw him the other day and played around with him, and I saw his, and his was gummier. I looked at it, the font where it says Berg was different. on the one end to this one. So I'm so picky about stuff like that that I went on eBay and looked, and I found this one, and I ordered two of them, this one and another, to throw the other one out of the bag, because I love this little gumminess. What exactly I want this for is, this is mostly for short approaches, maybe within 100 feet, maybe even 80 feet only. On little hyzer approaches, they stick, this disc just sticks wherever it goes, and I really love that. It's really important for tournaments. There's some situations where, maybe there's water only like 10 feet behind the basket, and my putter, the deputy, might glide a little bit and hit, and then sometimes stand up and roll 5 feet and go into the water, and then you're OB on, like, maybe you were shooting 50, 60 feet or something. This thing is perfect. It grabs the ground. You don't got to worry about gliding too much. So that's the Berg K3 line. Then we got the K1 soft Berg. So this is more stable, and I don't mean overstable, I just really mean stable. It's got to be one of the most torque resistant discs ever, considering the speed of it. It's insane how torque resistant it is and wind resistant. And I always talk about, when I talk about the Berg, it's wind resistant in both ways, like meaning even if you got it on hyzer and wind is going right to left and you would think it would push it, it almost doesn't. It like drops to the ground. So left and right and every direction, headwind. The thing with headwind too is it won't lift it like a lot of discs, this disc basically has no lift, so headwind drops it. So that makes it a little tough with approaching and headwind. So just something that I kind of learned from using the Berg for a while. But the K1 soft is wonderful. You can drive with it and give it like 80% power. I mean, way more power than any other putter, and just give it some spin, which is also the great part about this, the thumb track, is you can really give it some good snap and spin at that you wouldn't often be able to do with a putter, but you can give it that good spin and tons of power, and it won't go over 220 feet. I mean, on like a nice natural throw, say 70% power, this thing will go 200 feet on the dot. I've never aced with this disc, unfortunately, but I've hit the basket recently like 3-4 times in the last 3-4 rounds that I've had on shorter, 200-foot throws, and it's wonderful. It doesn't fade hard, it doesn't fade far, it doesn't skip. I like to just put a little bit of hyzer on it and aim, just to throw a little bit to the right, and it'll just right in there. It's perfect. It's a wonderful disc. One of my favorite throwing putters, and I could not do without it. But the K1 soft is great too. It's very stable, does not flip over. You can't flip this disc over. It's basically impossible. I also like to forehand that a little bit, but that is when you forehand it, you can turn it over. I can turn it over on a forehand, just that initial quick torque, I guess. But on backhand, I can't turn it over. So when I do forehand it, I'll put it on a lot of hyzer, pop it pops to flat and goes exactly what I want to do. But with that said, they recently put out the Berg X, which is more overstable. It still doesn't fade a ton. It's just a very reliable fade, and it's going to fade. And it's a little better for the forehand. I don't throw a backhand, but forehand, it's nice. You might be 200 feet and you're kind of afraid of how much snap and having enough finesse on your forehand. Sometimes that's an issue. So this one I can forehand and it is going to go straight, and it'll fade a little bit, but it's not going to flip over. And so this is a wonderful disc to have. By the way, I'll just say, in my bag I've got tons of discs. That's a thing that's in the disc golf community. There's a lot of discussion and disagreement on how many discs you should have. But I love the differences in all these discs, and I think almost all my discs have enough of a difference, and they do something different for me than the other ones. So I have tons of discs, and To me, it's fine. I got the Suzuka XL and the double XL power pocket. I've got plenty of space. It's not tiring me out. I just roll around the course with it, you know. And so anyway, the big thing is I love having all these putters and approaches. It makes for a lot of nuance in your game, you know, especially in your short game. And I love having a lot of nuance in my short game. Another thing about my style of play is I forehand, backhand, and I do some overhand throws, thumbers. No, I don't do tomahawks, but all those different throws means I've got a lot of discs for different types of things that I'm comfortable with what they do, and I trust them. So moving on, my next disc is the Proxy. It's a soft neutron Proxy, a little bit gummy, which I like a lot to be able to try to dig my thumb in and get good grip. But again, because of my throwing grip with putters, I like to have as much as I can really dig into with my thumb because I'm not doing like a real power grip. And this Proxy is awesome. It's more overstable than I would have thought, and as I thought. I kind of thought I was getting it as, you know, kind of like the inner core, very straight, maybe a little longer than the inner core, or could trust because of that. It's not totally straight. It has really good fade and hookup. So I expect it to definitely be one that'll finish a decent amount, but I could throw it really hard. You know, this one I trust to throw harder than I do the inner core. So that's kind of nice. For a putter, say it's a 270-foot hole, there's plenty of space to the right for me to have space for it to do its thing and kind of come in, then the Proxy. All right, after that, these are more like approaches, and I've got my Harp, and I'm not sure what the plastic this is actually. I think it's gold line. It seems like it's gold line, but it's basically blank. It has an under stamp, and I've had this a while. It's held its stability really nicely. It's very trusty. I actually call this my old trusty disc. It's great for all my hyzer approaches and 225 footers where I wanted to go up around something definitely hyzer, or and also for some forehand stuff. When I'm worried about that Berg turnover, I'll use the Harp. And I know I've also got the Berg X, but the Harp definitely is much more glidey than the Berg X, a lot farther, and more of a hyzer line than the Berg X. You know, Berg X, even though it's stable and comes back, you can't put it out here and expect it to move a lot. It's going to go out there and just stay there. Again, this one can come out and really work its way back, and that's great for backhand and forehand. This one's really good for that. It can't take a ton of power on the forehand. It will flip up and sometimes even turn a little bit when you don't want it to on an approach maybe. So that's one thing I have the zones for. This is a really beat-in zone, this ESP. Both these are ESPs. I just keep two ESP ones. I never really gelled well with the Z or Crystal or TI, but the ESPs I just absolutely love. So a newer ESP, I can really trust this one on a forehand and a backhand when I really need it to finish at the end. You know, 235 to 250 foot, this is great. This more beat-in one is awesome too because it's also reliable. It's got reliable finish, but it'll glide a little farther. So, you know, 250, 260 is this one too. And this one tends to be one of my biggest approach discs that I use. But this newer one is good, especially when there's a little bit of wind or just the stuff. I like having two that are pretty close-ish, but different enough. And then just based on the wind, I can play any situation. That's kind of also the thing about my bag is it's built to play any level of wind, any direction. So I shouldn't have to switch in and out, and with this many discs, it should be able to handle that much. So that's my putters and my approaches, and now we will get into the mid-ranges. I have actually one more approach and 6 mid-ranges. So the approach disc is the A2. This is one more notch up in stability above that newer ESP zone. And this is, I'd say, a notch in stability above like a Z, not quite as overstable probably as a Zone OS, but it's definitely above almost any zone. It's usable, but on a forehand, I will just 2-finger forehand. So that's one thing I'll go back to on my zone here. So for my approaches, say with a zone or with my harp, I actually will do a 1-finger forehand. So it looks about like that. And with the zone and approach disc, I just feel I have a lot more touch. And I can still put a decent amount of speed on it, snap, and the 1-finger works perfect. For me, going back to when I started the game, started playing about 10 years ago, I was mostly forehand. I couldn't figure out backhand like most players, and I did a 1-finger forehand for everything. So I'm used to that. And for me, for approaches, it works perfectly. When I'm doing a faster disc, I'll do a 2-finger forehand. And I think I'll say this is shown by Paul Macbeth in some of his videos. It seems to be the way that he does it, putting the pad of the finger, the index there, and then the middle finger, and using a 2-finger forehand. That doesn't work for a zone for me. A zone will flip over on that much torque. So now going back to explaining about the A2. The A2 can take the 2-finger grip, and I can snap this with with the full power and confidence that this is not flipping over, and that's great. So I use it for about 240 foot is about that exact spot I expect to use this. Maybe a little more, 240, 250, and just I put it out a little bit left, aim a little left, and I know it's coming back right to where I want it. That's the thing about approach discs. You're not trying to get a ton of distance, you're trying to be reliable, because that's huge on the course to just get within 20 feet of your target at 200 to 250 feet. That is going to be a ton of your strokes as an amateur. So A2, wonderful. This one has the Vino Macula, I believe, and this specific run seems to be the one. I've tried other ones. This seems to be the one that is exactly how I like it. So I've got a couple of them as backups too. To the mid-ranges, I like to have almost every step of stability from understable to overstable, and that's normal. A lot of players want to have understable, stable, overstable for each class of discs, speed of discs in their bag. And that's why a lot of players actually say that they like to only have about 15 discs, and that's fine. But I also forehand different discs. I like the nuance. Like I said, I like the nuance of the little bit of differences. These are not the same with each other. Sometimes I will have a couple that are almost the same in my bag, and the reason for that only is when I'm trying to decide between them. So I'll throw them in there and let one try to win out, from my playing. So anyway, to go back to how this works, I'm going to start with the most understable and move up from there. So the most understable is this MVP uplink. Got this pretty sick Lucha Loco stamp. I think that's a Chihuahua. But neutron plastic, love the neutron plastic. Again, with MVP and Axiom, that's my favorite plastic with theirs. The uplink is a 5.5 -3.1. That means it's flippy. Also, it's a 178 gram. I like to have high weight, usually 175 plus, or if I can get 175, 177, 178 on mid-ranges, I love that, because they just seem more controllable, which you're not trying to get your max distance out of these. Obviously, you're trying to get control and shaping your line to be able to do exactly what you want with your mid-ranges. So this uplink is great for hyzer flips, and I especially like it when I want a hyzer flip and I've got a tunnel to go down, what I want it to do is flip up to flat and glide straight, end straight, keep going, whatever, down that. And it's a lot, if it's a really tight tunnel, I especially like these really flippy mids. I like them even more than a putter usually, because reason why is that I may want it to go 250 feet, and I might be able to get my putter to go 250 feet, but I am going to have to power on a putter hard to get it to go that distance. And so the more power that you have to put into it, the less control you're going to have, obviously. So this one, I can throw it at, say, 50 to 60% speed. That's pretty low, very comfortable, and just get good snap on it, and just get good spin on it, and it will do its thing and flip to flat and straight at that. And I really like that. That gives me a chance to have more control on where I'm throwing. So that specifically is why this one is great. Again, I will preface, I didn't say earlier, I will say I live in Colorado at about a mile high. So the altitude here means that discs are a little bit more overstable than they would be at lower altitudes. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about how these discs may work for you. So the next instability level is detour. So this MVP detour, it's a 5.5 negative 2.1, so one notch less in understability, one notch more in stability than the uplink. And it's great for that because I can get pretty much the same flip up, but at a little more power, say 70 or 80%. And sometimes I might want that. There's just differences in how I might, when I'm choosing my disc for the hole. And these are not so close in the way that they fly that it bothers me at all. So the thing about this one as well is this one is great for a flat release that I want to just gradually travel to the right. And that's something that I've just started doing in my disc golf progression and disc golf journey. As far as, so that, because I've always had a forehand, and that's kind of a lot of this similar to what a forehand does, but this one is needed in certain spots. I will say, especially for the players that are around here that might watch this, there's the disc golf course in Palisade, Colorado. It's called Riverbend Disc Golf Course. Hole 16 specifically, you have to throw it out left and let it come back. And you can forehand that, but this is the disc I throw there. I just throw it flat, and it works. And watching a disc work slowly like that and do its slow pan is so satisfying. I love it. It's just so satisfying to see it do that, to see a disc do what it's intended to do without you having to, I don't have to put any on this to make it do that. I can just throw it flat and let the spin and the characteristics of the disc do that. So the detour, love this thing. Next one up is a Fission Hex. This is the only fission plastic one that I have of MVP, and it's just because it's turned out to be the disc that I wanted. It's a pretty straight little bit of finish, stable mid-range. Everybody needs your straight to stable mid-range. Now, then I've got the EMAC Truth. And this and the Hex are maybe the two closest discs in the bag, but it's different in that the EMAC Truth is it's almost like in between a mid and a fairway to me. A lot of people wouldn't characterize it that way, but to me it is, because it's so glidey. If you hit this right, flat, great spin, you might end up 350 feet. And I have ended up 350 feet on accident, on a 280-foot hole, and then, and that's just as upsetting in a tournament as anything else. I mean, it's great to be like, oh yeah, I threw it so far. It doesn't help if you're putting 70 feet back and taking your par and you're like, I really could have birdied this hole. So I'll just tell you, I love the EMAC Truth though. It's, I think 5502. It's reliably overstable. If you put it in a headwind, it might turn over, you know, but generally it is a wonderful disc, very glidey. But that's why I have the Hex, because say I'm a 280-foot shot, I feel more comfortable throwing the Hex because I don't think it's going to glide, you know, that much farther like I would think the EMAC Truth might. This is it's called hybrid plastic. It's kind of on the gummy side. It reminds me a little bit of like a Cast-Plast type of thing or one of those, and it's great. They're kind of hard to find. Wonderful plastic though. Love this disc, one of my favorites. All right, moving on to Overstable mid. This is the Pyro, the Axiom Pyro. Recently kicked out what I was used for a few years, which is the Buzz OS, and I love that disc, and I'm surprised that it ever got kicked out. But the Pyro, a little bit of backstory on that actually is that I hurt my knee, my lead knee last May. I actually got a partially torn tendon in my right knee, my lead knee. You know, when you spin, there's a ton of the force goes right into that spot, right into the outside, leading side of your knee. And I was wearing really grippy shoes, not my normal disc golf shoes, and my foot did not pivot out at the end of my release, and my body kind of went around it and instantly felt that. I had a lot of, basically an injury there. It took me months and months and months and months. I really didn't play. I actually, being honest with you, it's February, end of February, it's 7 months later. I was feeling good until last week. It was very sore after half of a round. I had to leave early, so I'm kind of worried. And I've got a tournament coming up in about a week and a half, so I'm staying off of it, but might have to take some time off again, and that's really painful when you love disc golf, like I do, and like you probably do. So anyway, whole reason I was telling you that is that when I came back about a month ago and was throwing, I wasn't liking my Buzz OS as much. I wasn't liking those super overstable discs as much. You know, I was having to really torque on them to get a flatter shot. So it's kind of been a good thing. A lot of I've gone to a little bit less stable options all the way along the board, and that's pretty good. I like that. It's added to my game. It's given me a lot more touch and finesse, and it's kind of just been good for my disc golf journey. So I will get back to, I've added the Pyro because it's similar to the Buzz OS. It's what, 5.5, -1, 2.5, I believe, and that means this disc is very reliably going to finish. It's going to fade. It doesn't really, pop to a turn much for me. And I also can put it on a hyzer, go where I want it to go. It's also good. I will one finger forehand this, give it some good snap, and it's basically like a long zone. I can 260, 250, 260 on forehand. I don't try to power a ton out of it, just try to give it some good spin and snap, and it definitely goes on the path that I'm looking for. Neutron plastic. All right, last mid right here. This is the Justice, Dynamic Disc Justice. And I've seen some videos lately, some creators are really hating on this disc. It's an absolute beefcake. If you want to talk about disc being beef, this is absolute beef. I think it's like 521 and +1, 4, I think. And so it does not turn at all, will not turn, and it dumps. And the thing that I love about this, I don't throw it backhand. It's way too overstable for me to get anything out of it. What I do is I two-finger forehand it. And when I need 250 to maybe 270 feet, exactly in that range, and I want to be able to, sometimes you really, like with a forehand, with also sometimes with backhands, you want to be able to power on a disc. Maybe you're most familiar hitting a certain distance. If you can power on it, you know, just always keep your power at 80%, which each of your discs, whatever, just as an example. Some people like to do this, some people don't play that way. But I like to play that way in a lot of cases. And in this case, I can just power on this and aim, say, pick an aim point. Sometimes there's like in, again, I'll say Palisade, Colorado, Riverbend Park, hole 18. There's a Mando that's about maybe 80 to 100 feet wide, 2 big cottonwood trees, double Mando actually. You've got to go between them and end right. So what I'll do is I'll take this, I will aim at that left tree, and I will really power on it. Give it some great snap, good snap at that tree. It'll go at that tree for a minute, and then it'll come out hard and get a skip and hopefully park the basket. So this Justice is just for that. Also, Watson Island Disc Golf Course, hole 4 is another one where I'll just aim to the left and I'll let it come in. It's about 270 feet, 275 feet, and this is just a perfect disc for that situation. This also is a great disc for wind. There are situations being in western Colorado where it is really windy, 30 miles an hour maybe, and we're still out there playing. Maybe it's a tag match, we're out there, we're gonna play no matter what. There's another course here called Match It, and it's kind of in a desert area, and there's a big gulch, you know, what basically like a drainage that's 30, 40, 50 feet deep down these kind of like sand, dirt cliffs. Places there where you have to go to one side. That's the main thing. You have to end over here, or else you're down in and you lose your disc, or at least get an OB stroke. And so this is wonderful for that. You could say you've got like a 30-mile-an-hour headwind and you can't go over here. This is the disc. You can forehand this into a 30-mile-an-hour headwind and it's not going to flip over and then left. That's pretty incredible. I mean, I've taken this and used it the whole stretch of all the holes that are kind of that way in that area and the same headwind, and I've gotten a great score in a windy round because I had this. And it's great to have those staple discs that you know will do what you need them to do, even in heavy wind. So that's all the mid-ranges.